Come with me to a land of just pure imagination. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all? Hi, I'm Gabby, and welcome back to another edition of the Fragrantician, where here on this channel we talk about nothing but, do we, Claude? Nothing but fragrances. So, if you want to hear in this video about unjust repression, sexual degradation, social class, and all things macabre and dark, then keep on watching. So, I was tagged by the beautiful scented snowdrops a while ago to do a video on Gothic fairy tales and fairy tale characters and their matching fragrances. Now, I've chosen six of my favourites, actually, and these fragrances represent something about that darkness, that almost, yes, disturbing feature in a fairy tale, because although it is a fairy tale, these fairy tales have different endings, different meanings, different styles to them. This is the un-Disney version of this. So let's talk about it. Are you sitting back? Relax and enjoy the smell. As a side note, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between, yes, scented snowdrops. Now, I had the pleasure of meeting him about a month ago now, I would say. Maybe more than a month ago, and let me tell you, girls and guys and everyone that's dying to know what he looks like, he's dreamy, he's tall, he's handsome, and he's everything that we love about him. I was just having a little moment there. He is everything that we love about John. Can I call you Jonathan? I just think Jonathan suits you better. In a fairy tale, you would be Jonathan. Well, yes, you would. Let's move on to the fairy tales. Let's start with the first one. Talking about Little Red Riding Hood. Now, Little Red Riding Hood, yes, she is an old fairy tale within herself. Fairy tale reminds us how deep and dark it is to not talk to strangers. Now, if you look at Little Red Riding Hood herself, she, in the story, apparently is quite an aristocratic lady who has inherited her grandmother's house. She needs to get directions to it, and the wolf, in sheep's clothing, does he represent the grandmother, or does he represent the wolf? And I wanted to depict a fragrance that I think in the ending, Little Red Riding Hood succumbs and lets her eat him and devour him. And I think the fragrance that I am going to pick is Salome, because it is such an animalic, dark, it is a fragrance, a perfume that evokes animalistic prowess within us. And I think this could suit not only the wolf, it could suit Little Red Riding Hood herself, because I feel at the end of the story, when she lets him devour her, I feel there's a little bit of, dare I say, sex in there. Yes, this is animal fur, this is wrinkled sheets, this is her laying in the bed waiting for the wolf. And I feel that this fragrance fits that depiction of the fairy tale. It is the wolf luring her, then she is luring the wolf, and does she let the wolf eat her grandmother? Who knows? These fairy tales are folklore, but Salome fits this because it is animalistic, it's a shipra, it's dark, it's brooding, and it's a prowess. I nearly went for Portrait of a Lady, but in the end this was the better fit. The next fairy tale, which I think has a lot of abandonment in this, is Rapunzel. And I talk about abandonment. This woman, we always say, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your long golden hair. Now, unlike the Disney version, Rapunzel was left abandoned in the tower, alone, frightened, quite austere, quite completely alone herself, and the prince has left her. Now, in the folklore, Rapunzel was meant to have had a curse on her, and in the end she let down her hair and the prince climbs up and they all fall in love. But in the classic fairy tale, he was thrown out of the tower into those bramble bushes, never to be seen again, or was he? And so for this fragrance, I am picking Pure Poison. It is the classic fragrance for a long blonde-haired lady. I see a cold, long blonde-haired lady wearing this fragrance myself when I picture this. It is ethereal, but it is cold and dark at the same time, and it's bright as well. It fits a fairy tale magic all about it, and the creaminess from the sandalwood and the magic of the jasmine and the orange blossom is the brightness there. But the orange blossom cuts through, and it is, to me, a depiction of Rapunzel, because this feeling of abandonment, this feeling of being alone within yourself as an emotion, evokes this fragrance. Fragrance conjures up so many thoughts and feelings and emotions, and it does, doesn't it, Claude? See, he agrees. And I feel Pure Poison from Dior would suit Rapunzel. She is that flaxen, golden-haired woman being alone in the tower. Now, the next one I think is the saddest of all of the fairy tales, by Hans Christian Andersen, The Little Mermaid. We're not talking about the Ariel version in Disney, no, we're talking about the mermaid that has unrequited love. The prince does not want to love her, and she throws herself into the sea and sacrifices herself and becomes this sort of sea foam. And I think it's quite sad, and I think the fragrance that depicts the mermaid is Figment by Amouage, because it is a mermaid fragrance. It has these floral notes, these aquatic notes, not too aquatic, but combined with this spiciness. Again, it has this feeling of dark and brooding, and it is a complex fragrance like all Amouage fragrances are. Amouage fragrances are definitely not a blind buy, and they're definitely not for the faint of heart. One or two that are popular, I would say Honor that is a popular one. That maybe is a safe blind buy. But any of the others, especially Figment, I would say no. It's not a linear fragrance. It develops. And I think, like the Little Mermaid herself, it develops from this character of wanting someone to this unrequited love, not being reciprocated, and sacrificing herself. And at the end being at one with herself, and her spirit is in the air. And this is for, I think, a free-spirited person. Amouage Figment. It has a juxtaposed position of this spiciness combined with these florals, combined with something slightly disturbing and yet alluring as well. If you're a fan of Eden by Cacharel, you will love this. If you're not, you will hate this. It's not the same as Eden, but I would say it has a little bit of DNA from it. A little bit of a DNA, and I absolutely love it. Strong projection, strong sillage, like all of these have. A classic Fairytale Mermaid fragrance. The next fragrance and Fairytale we are going to talk about is Hansel and Gretel, these two children that are abandoned yet again by their manipulative stepmother who does not want them. They go into the forest. They come across a gingerbread house. They come across this lovely lady, but she's a witch underneath. And in the end, they eat her by putting her in an oven and roasting her. Lightness, darkness, everything about this angel, because it is a sweet gourmand fragrance, the original version from 1990s, not the reformulated version. This caramel, candy floss, sweetness, but then the patchouli is there still. It's earthy and it's gritty and it's dark and it's deep. The children represent this in the meaning of that innocence. But then all throughout there's this slight a disturbing feeling. There's this slight feeling that teeters on the edge of a disturbance that you think to yourself, well, did they really eat the witch? Is it all about cannibalism? Fairy tales are passed through generations and generations. You know, the Disney versions give us the love, the laughter, the songs, the sweet chatty feeling of it. But looking at the storylines, reading between the lines, it's all really dark in these fairy tales. That's what I'm more attracted to. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think in the way it opens your mind that everything isn't as sweet and light as it appears to be, and your mind is more open to things that are more susceptible, I would say. You become more susceptible, but you become more aware, and that's what I love. Fragrance gives you that feeling as well. An angel gives me that feeling, and I think it describes the Hansel and Gretel fairy tale completely perfectly. The penultimate one that I'm going to talk about is Sleeping Beauty, the lady, the princess that was laid for 100 years, and then the prince awoke her and they became married and happily ever after. Well, Charles Perrault wrote a little different version. There are different versions of it. Now, it is quite a disturbing fairy tale because there is a curse put on her and the prince has to fight against all of this greenery, all of this forest that grows up around the castle. Everybody is put to sleep. Are they dead or are they not dead? No, they're just in this sleep state. But in the other classic fairy tale version of it, there is a version that the prince's mother is an ogress and she devours all the children and she devours her children. But the Sleeping Beauty herself, is it Aurora, escapes this? Or, in this version, in another version, the prince finds her, assaults her, yes, assaults her. She has 2 children, and it's only because one of the children is sucking on the flax of her finger that she awakes, and she's got 2 children. Well, take that as you will, and I am talking about La Vierge de Fer by Serge Lutens. And the reason why I've picked this fragrance, it has pear and lily combined with these metallic notes and sandalwood. Yeah. It has brightness. It has coldness. It has austerity. And I think it suits the style of the actual fairy tale, not just the princess herself. Lilies represent something that is quite dark in itself, can represent death in itself, can represent new beginnings. Lilies are sometimes seen as foreboding flowers, and that's one of the reasons why I've picked this, is because this fragrance has that lily in it. It has that metallic note running through it, that almost feeling of blood almost. It's not blood, but because the pear is strong in this. It's so blended really well. You detect that juicy pear, but it soon dissipates and comes into this dark lily. I don't really detect any of the sandalwood. It kind of goes from the pear to the lily, combined with this coldness, combined with this feeling of darkness. And Sleeping Beauty herself, I can imagine wearing this, waiting for her prince, and then to her horror, seeing that she has been assaulted and has children. That's life. That can be the horror of life. Or is she woken up by the prince and they live happily ever after, and then they dance off into the sunset? You decide. But I say, La Vierge de Fer, the Iron Maiden, fits Sleeping Beauty. And lastly, we go to Cinderella herself. Now, the end, this is the same as the original folklore, but the ending can be different. The actual Cinderella slippers were not really seen as glass slippers. They were made of squirrel fur. Yes. Or were they not? And her evil stepsisters chopped off their toes to fit into the shoes. And it was only the prince that saw the blood flowing from the feet that realised they weren't Cinderella after all. And then to cap it all, the doves of peace pecked out their eyes. Let's just think on that moment when we think of somebody that has harmed us. Back to the story. So yes, midnight poison has to be the deep, dark, Gothic fragrance. Let's face it, midnight poison has that rose and patchouli and the amber and the sweetness. And Eva Green depicted this midnight Cinderella in the advertisement, so it had to be there. Slightly dark. It's not the darkest of all of these fragrances. I would say probably it's the most likeable of all of these fragrances. It's, even though Angel is sweeter, it's more challenging. This isn't as challenging. This is Cinderella there herself. The deep dark blue And you can just imagine the carriage itself in this fragrance. But the rose in this is that brooding rose. The patchouli is a little bit dark. The ambery quality has some sweetness with a little bit of vanilla dusting through it. Midnight Poison, a Cinderella fragrance, a deep, dark, Gothic character. And I love it. Those were my 6 Gothic Fairytale character fragrances. What are yours? I'm actually going to tag someone. And I want to see her do this. I want to see her do this. I think she would be very good at telling a story on these. I am tagging Amanda from Limelight Lass. Yes, I'm tagging you, Amanda. You don't have to, but I'd love to see what your picks are. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.